Purdue had the most blocks in the country this year in 2021. We're going to watch some of their blocking here and see that these blockers are pretty good at using all the moves that we teach, the 3-step crossovers, the crossover 2s, the quick 3s. And Jalen, like Stephanie Samity, you've played against Purdue a lot and had to attack this block. What has impressed you about the block, or do you notice about the block as you've watched it over the past couple of years?
One, they have a bunch of really nice athletes. Even their setter is a pretty nice athlete for being a little bit smaller. I know they typically talk about, when I say they, I know the Shondells, they talk about, like, I think they just have an pretty good understanding of who they're playing and what their opponents like to do. And they just try to put as many hands in front of usually their most important players as possible. So they were able to figure out how to beat Wisconsin and twice actually this year. And they did a really nice job of, we see a lot of blocking on the left here. Pittsburgh is very left side dominant. Wisconsin sits a lot of balls to their middle, to their opposite behind. And they're able to do a lot of stuff like that. So I think that's one thing they do very well is understand the opponent and then try to put, as many hands in front of their opponent as possible.
This is showing the moves they made in their 4 NCAA tournament matches this year. No surprise, 3-step crossover is the most popular move. So looking at a chart like this, does that change the way, Ryan, that maybe you coach your blockers? Do you coach 3-step crossover more than maybe some of these other moves? And how do you use this data to kind of help your blockers know what move to make and when?
We want them to read, react, and see it. So we're training all of this footwork, and we'll go situations where we'll require maybe the 2-step. Definitely the 3-step crossover is what we want. You're going to max out, have the most power. But then as the game speeds up, there's times you're going to have to make those quick 3s, those 2 steps. And I think maybe the young ones might be a little reluctant because they're not quite comfortable with it. And so then we'll put them in drills where, hey, that's the only move you got. And, then as the game speeds up, they realize, hey, I'm going to be more involved in here. Ultimately we want our hands max jump over on the other side of the net when our opponent hits. We don't want them hitting something that's not on the other side in a position to block. And so they'll realize that crossover 2 move there is going to be faster. Purdue playing Pitt. Pitt runs a really fast tempo ball to the pin, and that's what you got to do. So,
Heather, how often do you guys run blocking trips in practice?
Every day it's going to be part of our pre-practice routine to get in blocking trips, crossover 3, crossover 2, 5 steps. It's always part of their warm-up, making volleyball dynamic moves to get their bodies warm and ready to make those moves with the ball in practice. So it's always going to be a part every day, getting to ball setter, ball hitter in practice as much as we can to work on that. I don't know, Purdue and how much they practice. I do want to say thank you for not showing our team getting stuffed by Purdue. I appreciate that. But I do think it also comes back to the first principle to defense is their serve. And I don't know they're serving as well as Jalen does. We played them once, but serving is putting your tough serving and getting teams out of system is getting the block opportunities to just make crossover 3s because they know where the ball's going. So I think being able to serve space and serve the seams and the person you want to serve is a pretty big deal. And I know from playing them, they did a good job with their serve and took it seriously and got us in some trouble. We hit one of our lowest hitting percentages against Purdue. So definitely, credit to their defense and their blocking. They do a good job.
So if you want to know what blocking trips are, it's what we just showed. You just have your blockers line up at the net and do all these moves. It could be before practice to warm up. Just go down the net doing crossover 3, crossover 2, quick 3. And then, like Ryan said, you start getting familiar with those. Block moves, even if they're uncomfortable with it.
We call them vitamins, part of our warm-ups. And you got to take your vitamins every day. And definitely, I think the middles for sure, but also your wing blockers need to get comfortable with those footwork patterns.
Couple final questions about blocking. Jalen, what can you do if you're playing a 5-1? Setter's front row unfortunately cannot get up high enough to block on the right side.
6'2", baby.
You could do a 6'2". We're a team. I mean, relative to the teams we typically play against, we had a very, very undersized setter, and I love Nicklin to death, but she wouldn't even consider herself the most athletic player. I think we try to build our defense around knowing that teams are going to try to set balls at her. So we talked about defensive positioning before. Sometimes we would do stuff based on we knew like teams would try to attack her, which typically a lot of attackers don't like to hit line, but they try to hit line against us. So we know going in. And I don't know. I think Luca maybe can explore more on this, but blocking is important. But in terms of like the effectiveness on winning volleyball matches over a long period of time, it's not as high as some other things, especially being able to run an offense and kill volleyballs like we all talked about earlier. So I would say you don't need to like discredit, using a small setter in the front row if they're a really good setter. If they're a really good setter and she makes the offense go, I think I'd rather leave her in than run a 6'2" and maybe make my team's offense not as good, even though maybe I might add a little bit with blocking. But you kind of have to evaluate the whole thing, not just look at it as, hey, I have a small setter and she can't block. But if you decide to leave her in and make her block, I'm going to try to make her as athletic as I possibly can. And we feel like swing blocking is the best way to do that.